All right, welcome back. We are game 3004 in the winter 2021 semester, and it is week 14, part one of our broadcast. So we're sitting at the bottom of the semester again, between this week and next week. This week we're doing a postmortem / retrospective. And I think, if I could erase the word postmortem from here, a lot of times postmortems are what went bad. How did the project die when it happens? But retrospectives are something that we want to talk about more often. So we're going to be talking about this week that, and there's no lab necessarily. This is an exercise that I want you guys to use so you can connect, to your final presentation. We'll talk about that in a sec. So what is due? So again, this week we're doing a postmortem review / retrospective. And a couple things that are due. The 11th weekly report is due Saturday. Your last weekly report, that's due next Friday. That's the last, I'll say the last day of classes at all is next week, Friday, right? Your final release is actually due this Sunday, April the 18th. So that means anything that's supposed to be in your game is in your game by this Sunday. And that's it. There's no more coding beyond this Sunday. And so you're code complete, code freeze, call it whatever you like. You're done, right? When it comes to the actual game itself. And your last peer review is also due this Sunday. So how'd you do overall? Think about it in a lot more detail if you can. Oh, one thing, sorry, I'm getting asked before I move on, is I'm recording, and of course I don't have a link to the page. 1 second, guys, and I'll put it up on this, and I just got pinged by that. Sorry, because I know some people want to watch remotely and they want this recorded and so on. So I'm fine with that. Here it is. That is your GitHub, sorry, a YouTube link. Okay. Going back to this. So yeah, and your final presentation again is the actual documentation, video, and all that stuff is due Wednesday next week. Okay, so guys, please keep that in mind. And Thursday, you're going to be presenting. So next week is presentation week where you can present your final product. I'm really looking forward to seeing your final version of your game. That's the final thing that you've produced on Sunday. So again, no coding allowed between Sunday and the presentation date. So you're not patching it up. There's nothing to fix, no bugs. You're done. So whatever you handed on Sunday is what you got. And that'll be your final presentation piece, if you will, that you're going to be sharing as your portfolio piece or whatever. All right, that's what you're kind of coming out with. All right, let's continue here while we're going. Yep, yeah, I'll make presentation slots available for you guys again like normal. Okay. What else are we doing? So this week, again, in lab, there won't be a lab, but for the lab session that's coming up later on, again, I'm not going to host another session just like last week. It's going to be a work period, but what I want you to do is I want you to get together with your team and write a short paragraph, kind of detailing what went well, what didn't go so well, that kind of stuff. The paragraph is not something that you're going to hand me. You're not going to submit to me or anything like that. This is for your work that you're going to do. What I want you to do, this is an exercise for you. This is the challenge, is come up with 4 bullet points that highlight the positive of what the entire semester was like for you from a project perspective. Focus on the project. And 4 bullet points that highlight the negative, anything that you feel that didn't go so well. Try and do 4 and 4 if you can, okay? And then to get the most of this exercise, please ensure you include feedback from every team member. So it's not something that you're going to do, in isolation. So I'm expecting that it's not going to be the producer that's going to fill this stuff out. It's everybody that's going to work together. So Luca, everyone to work together on a single paragraph that you're going to craft. That's the idea. So think about the team. You can start thinking about it. Maybe you can use Google Drive or whatever and Google Docs to do that. But the idea is that you guys are going to craft a paragraph together that really represents what things went well, what things didn't go well, and that kind of stuff. It's not something that you're going to submit. However, one thing I'd like to point out is that inside of your final presentation, there are 2 slides that this can apply to. One of them is the lessons learned slide, which is coming up for next week. So, for example, people, producers, and anyone else who's producing the project, the presentation document next week, this will directly feed into that, as well as future possibilities. So things that you would do differently, things to do to extend your game, that kind of stuff. Those are the two slides that this stuff would feed into, and I think it's worthwhile looking at, especially as you are you're kind of rounding out the semester. And I think it's great to reflect on the things that you've done, because many of you have done some awesome work this semester and lots of learnings, right? So so that is the exercise, and that's what I expect you guys to do for your lab, as well as use it for a work period, because I know that, as we're approaching the end of semester, more time for working is a better thing for you guys, as opposed to giving you another exercise to do other than this. This is directly related to your project. All right, so any questions around the lab time that you're going to spend today? That's what you're going to do today in the lab. That's what I want you to do. Now, whether you do it or not, that's up to you and your producer. I know some people are very busy at this point in time because it's final exams coming up, final assignments for other courses, and so on. But I really think it's a worthwhile exercise to go into, especially since you are producing potentially something that you're going to use as a portfolio piece that you can share when you look for work. Let's talk about the importance of project perspectives, retrospectives in general. And this is kind of the little thing that I want to talk about today. So really what we think about is they really allow you to codify what you've learned from experience, and to document mistakes and avoid future mistakes, and potentially grow your capabilities, which is really what we want to think about that, right? So when I think about agile methodologies, usually they include retrospectives, but because of our tight timelines this semester, you may have not had time to do them or even think about them as a regular thing. I want to talk about two things. One is the project retrospective, and the second thing is the regular retrospective that you would do in, let's say, for example, at the end of every sprint. Okay, we didn't have that opportunity this semester, but I'll talk about what the positives and negatives are of not having them. So when we think about a project retrospective, some really cool questions to ask when we think down are things like, what did we set out to do? And what actually happened? Did we produce the game that we say we're going to produce? Like, when you said you're going to produce a platformer, is that what you made? Did you make the game you thought you were going to make it? And if not, why did that happen? Why did it come to pass that you didn't produce the thing that you're supposed to do? Or if you had a plan to do certain features, why couldn't you get those done? Kind of thing. What did you learn? What did you really do well? And what are you going to do differently next time? Those are basic questions that everybody asks. That is like the center of all retrospectives, if you think, right? And then the other one that I like a lot is, what still puzzles us? What's still not something that I understand? Or what happened? Why is it that I can't do that thing? Or we couldn't make that work, as an example. So those are the things that we can document. And so you can look at them for an opportunity to grow or learn new things coming forward, or even, you might have learned certain things about yourself or the team. So here's some examples of what went well. A good example is something you want to document today. Is example, regular communication on Discord kept everyone on the same page. Even though all of us were remote, we felt connected. That could be a positive thing, let's just say, right? It's an example. What didn't go well? Due to other projects and schoolwork, we ended up rushing to complete each component of the project at the last minute. In essence, we experienced terrible crunch. That's something, by the way, that I've heard from a couple of your teams. And how to fix it. For example, maybe it's going to be something like, instead of trying to complete the entire component by the deadline, we can produce smaller chunks of the project each week. And in that way, we can reduce the crunch required as we approach the deadline. So that means that's kind of how we fix it. And although I mentioned kind of putting together things like what went well, what didn't go well, positives and negatives, 4 points, try and think about when you're talking about the positives and negatives, how would you fix it? Because it's easy to point out problems, but the real, I think, value in this exercise is really pointing out how you're going to fix it, right? So if your producer says, we really didn't communicate well, okay, fine, that's great. Or if people didn't show up, well, how can you fix that? kind of thing. And part of it is in the real world is different than it is now. And I know that I've heard a lot of times like this is not the real world, so group projects in schools kind of suck. But by the way, you might find even in the real world, even when people are getting paid, that you might have very similar problems, right? Because of the way managers work, the way the company works, the seniority of the employee, all kinds of stuff can come into play to make your experience very similar to what you're experiencing here, where you have a person that's been given to you as a resource, and you're the producer or the project manager, or you're even a junior, and you figure out that that person doesn't do anything and you're doing everything. That happens in the real world too. So let's talk about the core process a little bit. Sorry, there's Amber. I feel like if every different project from different courses was a different job, I wouldn't be working this many jobs in the field. Yeah, a lot of times though, Amber, you know what? We work on multiple projects at the same time. I don't know too many people that are only working on a single project, at any one time. So you might find the same thing for yourself. You might find that even in the real world, you'd be working on multiple projects. Will you be working on so many? Maybe not. But are there going to be multiple things you're doing at the same time? You probably will. And is everyone good at multitasking and being able to split their mind across different projects? No, they're not. Right? So that's the thing. It's kind of something you have to learn to do better. Not just you, but everybody. So here's the core process. The first thing we want to do is review the project, talk about, project goals. In real life, you talk about things like goals, your timeline, budget. You guys don't have a budget for this semester. Things like major events, things that went well, things that really did well, things that set the project off kilter and so on, and things like success metrics. You talk about all these kind of things. So that's something that you do. You review the project. And a lot of times when you have a bigger project, especially if it's large enough that you haven't seen everybody, all the teams, all the same time. You guys are a small team of people, 4 to 6 people, but you might be dealing in the real world in much larger groups of 40, 50, 60, 100 people. A good example of that is when I spoke to Ubisoft during our curriculum night, our faculty night. That's the one thing they said. They said, we would love to see the schools have larger project teams of 40 people to produce a game, right? And what would that look like? And how would that run? Because I think that's a great experience, they said, when it comes to soft skills and hard skills. And I think that is 100% right. I don't think we can ever get that quite right at the college level or even university, to have 40 people work on a project at the same time, which will be a good simulation for what it looks like kind of in the real world in a larger group. Even if it wasn't 40, maybe 20, a 20 people team is something that's quite common as well. So, the other thing is, the next part is discuss what worked well and what didn't. That's kind of the core of your meeting. We just kind of talked about that a little bit. The next part is using a survey. Sometimes what happens is it helps if we preload information before we go into a meeting. So in other words, you do a project retrospective survey, you gather information ahead of time, and then you have issues you can talk about before the meeting comes up. And also, a lot of times people might feel less intimidated to speak in a meeting when their thoughts and their feedback is out there already and been captured, and they don't feel there's a political issue around speaking in a meeting. And I mean that, like, especially in a larger organization, especially in your junior, saying something to seniors in as an example, in a large meeting might be considered by you a career limiting move, CLM. And in order for you to avoid that, you don't say anything, right? And that's not good, because a lot of times juniors are very honest and they talk about how they feel that the things went, and feelings are very important. We're going to talk about that in a sec. The other thing is you want to create a safe environment for sharing. So if you're a producer and you're facilitating the retrospective meeting, and this is the project retrospective, the big one, not the little ones that we're going to talk about in a second, then the idea that everyone's viewpoint needs to be respected is important. And the other thing is that you need to set ground rules that There are no confrontational comments or personal attacks. But also, we don't want to sugarcoat any problems. We don't want to, like, say that, oh, everything's fine. And we'll talk about that as well. However, there are situations when there are key players that have let the team down, and we need to identify those things as well. But we need to do it in a way that it doesn't alienate, but especially in larger teams where you can't just swap out people and fire anybody. It's not possible for different reasons. Sometimes there's unions involved. Sometimes it's because of strong, political or social ties in the organization. Right? You can't just get rid of that person that you don't like or that didn't do their job, right? So you need to talk about it, and you need to figure out ways of retraining them or helping them, or helping them work better, right? Because that's something that we need to do. And then finally come to a conclusion. So don't make the meeting last forever. Make sure that you have a plan, like for every meeting, and a timeline. I think it's important. And it's supposed to really cover everything that went on in the project, talk about things like major milestones, deliverables, and that. And then also any issues that you bring up should have solutions identified at the end. You don't want to just say, well, here's a bunch of problems, and we have no solutions for them. Try and think about solutions together in the team. Right. And then at the end of the day, no one should feel or leave the meeting feel like they haven't had a chance to participate fully, whether it's through the survey that you did beforehand, or even during the meeting if you didn't have a chance to fill out the survey, if there was such a thing. And you try and not to leave any issues unresolved. And the reason for that is because that is just it's going to make people trust the meeting less, as an example, because they're like, well, we talked about all this stuff in the meeting and there's no follow-up. So who cares? Well, why does this meeting even matter? Because there's nothing that's going to happen as a result of this thing. So that's kind of the core process for a project retrospective. But I want to talk about something that we should do more often, which is retrospectives. And there's a great little book that I can tie into called Agile Retrospectives, Making Good Teams Great. It's a little bit older, 2006. When I say that 2006 is old, I always feel weird about it. But anyways, it's a great little book, even though it's a little older, and I think it gives some really great inspirations about what to do. And here are the key points I'm going to share with you. One of them is this is the first page, doing regular retrospectives. So that means things like at the end of every sprint. In this case, you could have done it at the end of every component. Your project manager or producer could have, if they didn't do it already, talk about kind of what happened. Why we weren't able to meet the requirements of our, of this component, whatever that component is, whether it's the alpha release or the first playable or whatever. And what it does is it'll improve capability, improve quality, and improve capacity of your team when you try and do that kind of stuff. All right. So the anatomy of a regular retrospective looks like this. And again, this source comes from that great book, Agile Retrospectives. So what you want to do is have these phases, set the stage, you gather your data, you generate insights and decide what to do, and then you close the retrospective. And you kind of do this within a very small time-boxed, meeting. So you don't want to do it so it takes like hours. It's like something that's going to be quick but effective. And if you look at the graph, and I like this this kind of diagram because it makes kind of sense to me, right? Set the stage, you gather data, this is your retrospective. You generate insights, decide what to do, right? So this is this inspect and adapt kind of stuff. You close the retrospective, which feeds into, experiments and improvements. I think this is important when you do experiments and ways of doing things differently. And then you build your product out. You deliver some kind of product increment, which is your component that you've been working with, and then back into the retrospective again. And you keep going through this continuous improvement phase, because that's what it is. It's a cycle, a continuous improvement cycle that allows you to make your teams stronger and stronger. Now, this, again, it's difficult to apply in a school environment because one of the things that people have trouble with in a school environment is, well, they don't care what's going to happen to the team afterwards sometimes, right? But there are some teams that I've seen at George Brown and other places that stay together afterwards, that actually continue to produce something or whatever. And if you're one of those teams here with me today, that's fantastic. right? But sometimes, you're working in a team because you just want to finish the project because you got to finish this course, because you want to finish the semester, because you want to finish and graduate, right? And I understand that too. But I think this is a kind of a good recipe for success when it comes to regular feedback for your project from within the team. Okay, so that's something that I have to specify. So a couple things. So when you set the stage, it helps people focus on the work at hand. So this is what we're going to talk about. We want to talk about the time that we have together when we're doing our regular retrospective, and we want to remind everyone how long we're going to meet, and we want to give everyone a chance to speak. So that's the important things. We don't want just the producer speaking or one person that's going to go on their soapbox and take over the meeting. We don't want that. We want everyone to have a chance to talk. So like a round table, as opposed to, even if it's a virtual round table, as opposed to like one person at the head and everyone else listening to that person. It doesn't have to be that way, okay? We want to gather data and start thinking about hard data, events, metrics, features, stories, all that kind of stuff. You want to think about those things. And then you want to talk about feelings. Okay, and you want to link the feelings and everything else that people have about the things that you produced right in the meeting. You need to talk about those things because a lot of times, there's some events or things that didn't go well that have an emotional charge that can affect the way the entire group performs at the end of the day, right? So again, having these regular meetings, it kind of sometimes deflates or diffuses the bomb kind of thing in your group. Especially when you want to talk about difficult issues, a person, example, not producing, a person not part of the meeting, what do you do? That kind of stuff. That is a challenge, but you need to talk about it. So once you gather data, you want to generate insights. So ask things like, why did this happen? How come we couldn't get this done? And that kind of stuff. And try not to have people jump to solutions right away. This is also known as solutioning. Don't solution necessarily, but rather what you want to think about is, you want to look at cause and effect. Okay, so if this happened, this thing that didn't make the project go well, whatever this thing is, kind of stuff, what's the cause of this thing? Like, what's really the cause? And when we talk about cause and effect, you can use different methodologies to get to there. Root cause, management, if you will, or root cause evaluation. Things like asking the 5 whys. I always go back to, my young son who always asks me questions like that. Daddy, why is the sky blue? And I'm really paraphrasing here. Well, because the light as it passes through the atmosphere hits different gases and splits into its different colors. And well, you know what, son? There's more blue in those colors than anything else, right? Well, why does it split the light? And then they can keep going down that path. Well, it splits the light because, but the idea with the 5 whys methodology, which I really like, is it kind of gets down to that root cause. If you try and ask the question why a bunch of times, and I know you guys we've talked about this before in other project classes, I'm sure, if you probably heard about it, but I think root cause analysis and root cause evaluation is definitely something you should think about, as opposed to, here's the solution. This is what we're going to do. Let's solution together. It's not solutioning. It's trying to find the root cause. And then and having that not occur again if possible. Then decide what to do. So maybe you need experiments. Example, maybe you want to do some kind of you wanted to do some procedural generation in your game and it wasn't quite working well. Memory management was bad. And so someone thought of ways of, creating different chunks in your world or whatever. And so you create this experiment. Don't necessarily have it as the main part of your game and then talk about the results the next time. Hey, they really worked, or that didn't work at all. But having experiments, or at least a direction of what to do to fix the problems that you're encountering, is important. Whether they're technical problems, or maybe it's an experiment that you have to do with people. Pair programming. We have a person that's not pulling their weight on the team. Let's try pair programming. Maybe they're gonna actually contribute more that way, as an example, than not contributing at all. And especially if you're stuck with a person on your team. One of the things that you want to do when it comes to deciding what to do is make sure that people sign up and commit to tasks. If you expect that, if you don't do that, then individuals will start thinking about, well, the team is going to do the task, and then no one ends up doing it. And so please make sure that you do that when you go through it. And then you want to close the retrospective down. It's very similar to closing the project retrospective. Decide how to document your experience. I recommend an action register is a good kind of a good tool. There's other tools out there as well. And then help your team decide, and this is for the producer for sure, how they'll retain what they've learned from the retrospective. How are we going to take that? Are we going to document it somewhere? Is there going to be some other kind of whiteboard that we're going to use that is something that like a Jamboard, which is becoming more and more popular these days with Google Drive and so on. Is there something we can document that we can always look at to try and avoid some of these problems? Let's talk about anti-patterns a little bit. Here's some things that we hear a lot. Everything is fine. I worry when I hear about that one, right? Everything is fine. Everybody's great. Everyone's golden. Everyone's contributing equally. When I hear those things and I see that in your peer reviews, I'm like, yep. Sometimes it's true, but for the most part, and if you say everything's fine, so we don't need to do a retrospective. The other one is we have no time. Again, an anti-pattern. No time because I'm busy with school. I'm busy with 5 things. I have a lot of stuff going on at home. Whatever. It's remote. It's COVID. I got no time. Or the last one, which is the worst one, it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time. I don't find any value of having a conversation with people that I'm never going to see again. All right. After my time is done here at George Brown, see you later. I'm going to go my way. You're going to go your way. And we've submitted what we can to Tom, and see you later. I think these are not great attitudes. And I think that what we should do is instead, I know I'm just trying to tell you, I'm reflecting to you what I've seen, not just in the comments, but I've had individual conversations with people, a lot of other stuff, not just with you guys, but with others. And I always hear these things when it comes to retrospective meetings. And I just, you know what? I definitely do not agree. I think it's always good to reflect, right? And there's always learnings, even when you think that you're not going to learn anything. There's always an opportunity to learn. And when we learn, we improve. And that's individual. All right, so that is my little chat about retrospectives. And that's what the topic of today and this week is. So what I'm hoping is that you guys can produce a little paragraph that can help you write your couple of slides, 2 or more slides that you're going to produce next week. I think there could be some great insights from you guys and some great takeaways. And I'm hoping that every one of you is going to have more insights than we ran out of time. Here are the common insights that I get from, lessons learned slide. We didn't have time. Some people didn't do their work. Some people didn't show up. These are bad things that happen. And, in the future, I'd like to work with a different team. Don't say those things. Those things are, not communicating wrong. Communications is often the problem. But what is the solution? What would you do differently? How would you communicate better? So come up with a solution, not just the problem, is kind of a common thing. And kind of focus on that for next week. Solution. What's the solution? What would you do to fix it? And then when it comes to future possibilities, don't be, go out into left field and try and talk about things like starting your own AAA company, but rather, think about what little features you could add if you did have more time. If I had more time, what feature would I add to make my game better? That kind of stuff. And if you ran out of time, why did you run out of time? What was it that you didn't do? Or what was it that you would remove? Is there something that you added in that you would probably not add in? There may be something that I've asked you to add in that you don't think belongs in the game, or, something like that. Those are the things that I'd like you to, to talk about more than anything else. So that's kind of where I want you to take this thing for next week. On that, this is probably going to be our last meeting together where we have any kind of conversation at all. I know that there's not everyone here today because I know that there's a lot of people that have other priorities. And you may have figured that there's nothing that's that you're going to have to do today, and it's just another project checkpoint. But I want to leave you with a couple of things because we may not see each other again, kind of one-on-one when we can have this conversation. Next week, it's going to be presentations, and I'm not going to be able to talk like this. I'm not going to have the same opportunity as this week. So here's my little tidbits of knowledge that I can pass to you. One of them is, if you don't ask, you don't get. And This is a derived saying for me. It comes from many years of asking about things and asking for things. And one of the things that, people say to me, Tom, you got to be realistic. And I always think of it like this. Yes, you need to be realistic, but sometimes if you're unrealistic and you ask for things that people think are impossible, you might get them. Because if you don't ask for them, you definitely won't get them, right? So you want a resource, ask for it. You want something to happen, ask for it. Always ask for something, because it's like that old saying, if you don't knock on the door, it's not going to open, right? So I know it's kind of a weird thing. Here's another one. And Michael says, getting a no, no leaves you in no worse shape. I agree. You can't lose anything, nothing to lose. Always keep a good team together. Here's another one. So if you make a really good team, and if you work with a really great team at George Brown or somewhere else, I think this is super important, because you've trained each other, you've worked together to gain synergies and everything else. And there might be an opportunity you can work together to create something in the future. Keep connected. That's what I mean by always keep a good team together. You never know how you can work together to produce something that's awesome. And it takes a lot to put together a team that's effective. Here's another one that I like. Work hard to listen to what other people are trying to tell you. For me, I always kind of turn it on within myself, and I say, take a deep breath. Okay, Tom, it's time to listen. I really do that a lot. And the reason for that is because I got to figure out that two things. I'm not the smartest person in the room, that's for sure. More often than not, there's at least, twice as many people that are smarter than I am, right? So the best thing to do is listen. Listen to other people, because you never can tell what they're going to say. Don't assume that you know what's going to come out of that person's mouth. Listen to them, because there's going to be some great insights potentially. And also, listening is a great way of, kind of addressing the issues, as opposed to not listening and judging, already having an idea of what you want to say, focusing on what you want to do, as opposed to what that person is trying to tell you. It's really, really important to listen. And the last point, which I think is that's made me much happier in life, and I'll talk about this a little bit, is keep positive and surround yourself with positive people. And I know that's difficult in these times, because it's hard to keep positive when there's a lot going on, when it's COVID and when we're isolated and, right? But, like we said earlier, when it comes to, if you don't ask, you don't get, you've got nothing to lose from being positive. Nothing. All you can do is, and try and think about all the good things that you've accomplished and all the things that are on your side. I think those are important thoughts as you move forward. So I want to leave you with those thoughts, because I know you're leaving after this semester and you're going to go, potentially some of you already have a job or are going to go to a new place. But I want to talk about next steps with you too, even though I'm not supposed to be your career counselor or coach. We are in one of the last courses potentially that you're going to do here at George Brown. And so one of the things I want to talk about is next steps. What are you going to do in terms of a job? Where do you see yourself? And a lot of times, and I've had this conversation over this entire week now, a bunch of times in different forms, but here's one. There's a great site for you guys called xbgamejobs.com. And it's something that's come to my attention over the last little while. They have, it's not just the only one, of course. There's other ones, Indeed, of course, and other places. But this one is game specific. And it's these kind of, this outfit's out of Toronto, XP Game Jobs. And they kind of advertise games everywhere, in the world. So if you were going to search for this, and again, I'm not affiliated with them whatsoever. I just found that it was quite interesting what they have. If I search for jobs, as a, kind of on this site, you'll come up with quite a few of them all over the world. So Los Angeles or Singapore or whatever, from different places. You can also specify your job level, if I'm a junior, as an example, or if I want to work in a specific country or location. So let's say, for example, I think that I can't work anywhere else. I want to work in Canada, as an example. And then you can see that these are all jobs within Canada. And there's going to be pretty good companies here, EDOS in Montreal and Ubisoft and so on. So I think it's really great opportunity to take a look at this site. And then why? Because it's fantastic to look at some of this stuff that you can tailor your resume to for next steps. What are next steps? And how do I tailor my resume to, to kind of meet one of these jobs that I feel like doing in the future? Even if you're not ready to do it right now, what can I do? How do I put a timeline together of things that I need to learn so I can qualify or meet some of these things that are listed here in this job, right? So, having next step is one thing in your mind. Yeah, I want to get a job, but the better way to do it is actually have a plan. So that is something that I want to leave you with, as well as my friend Grant Cardone. He's not really my friend, but Grant Cardone, he has this thing. He's written this book called The 10X Rule. And if I can refer another book to you, that's a good book to read. It's kind of a sales book, but it's called The 10X Rule. And one of the things he talks about in it, and it's pretty funny, some of the things he says, and inappropriate also, but funny as well, is he talks about doing things 10 times harder than you think. Instead of putting one resume together and sending it out to 10 jobs, and if there's only a 5% chance that you're going to have an opportunity to get a job, that means you're not going to get an interview. If you only put 10 resumes out there, right, to 10 different jobs, and it's 5%, that means chances are you're not going to get a hit. But if you put 100 resumes out to 100 different places and you have 5% chance, that then probability-wise, you're going to get 5 hits, right? So doing things 10x or 10 times harder than you think, as an example, and going to that next level, a lot of times volume really kind of produces results. So I think that if you're going to do anything, really work for, to get a lot of resumes out there over the next little while, especially now that you're in graduation mode. And I've heard a lot of things like, well, what about internships? What about, working or volunteering and all those kind of things? They're great if you don't have a lot of experience in the field, but you want to try and there's a lot of jobs out there. There's thousands of jobs potentially that you can work for. Let me just of course, I've got a lot of noise going on. Hopefully you don't hear that too much. All right. I don't want to kind of belabor the point. I just wanted to talk about those little things with you guys before we went on. And next week, just as a reminder, is we have a couple of things here, coming up. One sec, I want to close my door. People in my house love to do things like make shakes when I'm actually producing a video or something like that, or whatever. So I do apologize. But the idea here is I want you guys this is a project checkpoint as well, and I want you to keep on track on what's due. So this is all the stuff that's due for next week. Any questions or any comments about the stuff I've talked about today? So retrospectives, that's awesome, Michael. Fantastic. Serious Cat, my boyfriend was teaching his last class of the semester today. You heated up a lasagna in the microwave 4 feet away from him. No. Yeah, I know everything is loud and it's really terrible. But yeah, I know it's pretty crazy. It happens all the time to me. I don't know what it is. It's when you live with other people, it's just going to happen. So, but anyways, any other thoughts or whatever about retrospectives? Again, I'm not going to make it a mandatory exercise. I'm not going to try and get you, you have to produce a paragraph. I'm saying this is the way that I would do it. If it was me, I would get together, craft a short paragraph with your team. That's the idea behind it. And then try and pull out those bullet points, the positives and negatives. Try and think about those things, because those are the things you should talk about on your retrospective next week. These are the things that I could have done differently. These things that we could have done. Maybe it's a feature that you could have built in, or maybe you could have avoided doing something, whatever it's going to be. And it's going to be specific to your team and your game. Okay. All right. That's it for me, guys. Thank you so much for coming out. And I have to tell you that this is definitely one of my favorite classes this semester. You guys are awesome again, especially the things that you produce. And I'm looking forward to seeing your final presentations and your final product next week, truly. And I know that I've also been asked by others to, we're going to share that somewhere else. Well, one thing I'm going to do next week, of course, is record all of your presentations. So when you're presenting live, even if it's a recording that you're showing me, I'm actually going to record it live on YouTube this time, and hopefully we'll have a chance. I'll share it with you, of course, on Blackboard, but I'm also going to share it with Alex and with others, because I think it's important for us to celebrate the stuff that you guys have produced this semester. And I think there's a lot of learnings that I've seen that you're going to take away. So thank you so much for doing that and going through this whole process with me. I think this is a new course that we're offering here at George Brown in the way that we're doing it. So I think it's a great opportunity for all of us to take stuff away. All right. Thank you so much for that. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next week. That's it for me for the recording, and I'll stick around for any questions you might have.